he was dead, and he was only 40 some odd years old. And we had almost 100 spirits in our bedroom, and they showed up to show support for him, you know. And I really thought that was neat. But it took a while for all those spirits to leave after the reading, you know. And my wife was sitting there. I was doing the reading, but I looked over at her one time. She's sitting there looking around the room because they were all around our bed and everything.
Well, what's the longest you guys ever had spirits hanging around your house after you did a reading?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think? A couple days?
Oh.
Oh, my wife says, when was that, honey? Oh. Yeah, my wife says she's still got a lady that's been with her since May.
Wow.
But, yeah, they tend to hang around and sometimes, but, you know, she's not. My wife says she don't mind it. She's companion.
Well, how about, what's your opinion on Ouija boards?
I don't like them. I wouldn't use them for anything other than firewood. They're really nasty. I used them back when I was younger, and the Ouija board, the spirit that was with that board was getting stronger and stronger each time I used it. And I felt that there was going to be a time that he was going to jump me and take me over. I had a change in my personality. I really think he was just about ready to take over my body or my mind or something. But I had to get rid of that board because it did nasty things to me. I mean, as far as the thoughts and stuff that it placed in my mind. And if you're really strong-minded, you might be able to do it as a game, but they sell that as a game, and they sell it as a board game, and it's not a board game. It's something that a medium or somebody would use to contact or have communication with the spirit world. And if you know how to do it, you can do it, and it's very, very dangerous, I think. It's very dangerous.
I think it is because, again, my first wife was a witch. She was in... one day I came home from work, and there was a whole bunch of people in our apartment. And that they had the lights down, they had the candles going, and they had the Ouija board going. And it scared you-know-what out of me. But what I found, with my first marriage with her, because, she lived for the Ouija board. And I kind of, I was watching these people, and it seemed like the questions they were asking and things that were happening at the start seemed to give them real answers. Like she would get a hold of her past grandmother and all that stuff. But then towards the end, I started thinking in my mind, I think this thing is given her, it's not, when she was talking to her spirit of her, past grandmother, she wasn't talking to her grandmother. I think she was talking to evil spirits. And I think they were trying to take control. And in fact, I think it really did, because that's one of the things that destroyed our marriage.
Yeah.
So I think they're evil.
Starting out, if you ask it questions that you know the answers to, it will tell the truth, like how many kids are in our family, it will tell you, and it will tell you the truth, or what's the name of our dog or something like that, If you know the answer, it's going to tell you the truth. And the reason why it does that is it builds you up to think that it's telling the truth all the time. And the minute you ask it a question that you don't know the answer to, that's when you're in trouble. because it's going to lie through its teeth. And that's what happens to a lot of people. They get so involved in this Ouija board stuff, and almost everything that it's telling them is nothing but lies, and they become more evil, like you said. The longer that you're with that board, the more evil it gets. It tells you things that you might not even want to hear, because it is pretty bad. I think it's on the dark side of being a medium or whatever. It's kind of on the dark side, you know. It's something that I would not want to deal with as a medium. I stay away from that part of it. I don't want to deal with those things. I actually think they're demons.
That's what I think.
Yeah, they're actually demons that's not in the board, but they're attached to the board. And it's something that I don't deal with. The only time I deal with demons is if I'm asked to bless a house or something like that to get rid of the evil. And I can do that. I'm a minister, and I do everything I do is spiritual. I'm a spiritual medium. I'm a spiritual healer, and I do things on the side of light. Nothing about me is dark. I don't do any of that dark stuff. I stay away from it. It's scary. That's one thing that scares me.
Yeah, I think what it does, it gets your confidence built up. You believe everything in the Ouija board, and then it changes your personality. And then, it can take a kind, gentle person. After a while, they get so obsessed with the Ouija board. Their personality totally changes. And then they can be a sweet person one day, and then a month later you see them, and they're the biggest jerk in the world and mean. And they're, and I blame that on the Ouija board. Now, do you have a couple of stories you can share out of your book on these ghost stories?
On the ghost stories?
Yeah.
Let me. I got one from my grandmother. Back when I was a kid, she told me this one. When she was a kid, she was, I guess she was about 9 or 10 years old, she said. She went to, her family went to stay with some relatives who lived a day's ride away. Back in those days, this was around 1903, something like that. And her family, all they had was a horse and buggy. So the family loaded up in the horse and buggy, and they went to this other farm that was owned by their relatives. The farm was a day's trip, and so it was probably about like 20 miles or so. Anyway, when they got there that day, they got there just in time to eat a little bit of dinner, and then it was dark, and they went to bed. And my grandmother was told to sleep on the couch out in the living room. So she bedded down on the couch, and she said early in the morning, it was just before sunrise, she said that all of a sudden she heard somebody walking around in the bedroom up above where she was sleeping. And it was walking back and forth. She could hear the footsteps. And then all of a sudden, she heard the door to that bedroom open up, and somebody came out and walked down the short hall that they had there in that house upstairs. And then she thought for sure somebody was coming downstairs and maybe to see her or something. She didn't know what was going on. And then she heard footsteps coming down those old stairs, and they were creaking and stuff as somebody was stepping on them. And she said that when they got down to the bottom of the stairs, instead of coming into the living room where she was at, they made a turn and went out to the kitchen. And the footsteps went through the kitchen, and the back door opened up and closed, and that was the end of it. Well, the next morning when everybody got up, they were sitting around the table eating breakfast. She asked, she was wondering who went outside, early in the morning. And they were looking at each other, and they said, nobody went outside. She said, well, yeah. She said, I heard somebody going down the stairs and everything. They went out the back door. And anyway, they told her that the only thing that they could think of was the farmer that owned the house before them had committed suicide. And he had committed suicide, they figured, early in the morning. And he had hung himself in the apple tree that was out in the backyard. And so my grandmother told me that she felt that was his spirit that was walking back and forth, pacing up there, and then coming down the stairs and going out the back door. He was going out there to hang himself. Mm-hmm. So that was a story from my grandmother. And then I have a friend that I went to high school with, grade school and everything. He's been a friend of mine for about 60-some years. And anyway, he told me, and this is in the book also, his mother actually told him this because he was small at the time, but they got up to go visit somebody, and they got in the car, and they were traveling along the road, and all of a sudden they saw this light, and the light kept getting bigger and bigger and closer, and it was a UFO. And it scared everybody to death because it was traveling right beside the car, doing the same speed as the car and everything. And he said, there was no noise or anything, but it scared him to death because the thing was, I guess it was pretty good size, and it was traveling right beside him as they were traveling down this road. And they really didn't know what to do or what was going to happen. And I guess after a few minutes of this, it took off and went around to the other side or whatever. But it really scared the family on that. So that's one little story that was in there also. But there's a lot of stories I have in there from people that... let me see if I can find another one here.
Yeah, a UFO following me on the side of the car would kind of really scare me because you never know if they're going to abduct you and the car all at the same time.
Well, really, that's really... Here's one that's from Annette Potter. And I told the people if they didn't want their name to be used to anonymous or something like that. And this one's from Annette Potter. It says, I was staying at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, oldest property on the Strip with a sordid mob history. In the middle of the night, I woke and saw a dark figure moving around the foot of my bed and coming up the gap between the twin beds. I hit the light, and there was a full figure of a man in a 60s sports blazer with blood all over his face. I yelled, go away, and start swinging my arm in his direction. Just like that, he disappeared. I woke up friends in the other bed, and my buddy said, what the hell are you swatting at? I told them, and they laughed at me. The following morning, my buddy said after I had fallen asleep, water was dripping on his head, but there was no leak on the ceiling, and was convinced we may have shared a paranormal encounter. So that's one from Las Vegas